Thank you everyone for getting ourselves back on. So we have a new link. We have a little verification system for the public. And we'll move forward. Where we were, I'd like to make a motion to my colleagues or a suggestion that we take the action items in the order they're presented on the agenda. And just take item 5 at the end of the morning, right? So that we can get through all of our votes today. And I'll look to my colleagues if there's any concerns about that. If not, can I get a motion to make that change the agenda?
Yes, I support that. I do have a plane to catch. I need to leave at 1:45. And I would like to request that item 9 happens before that. That's it. Thank you. Then I'll second.
How about the motion be that, well, we can push 5 further down, assuming that the time frame is pushing for Commissioner Kim Lopez. Is that okay to be a little vague in that? But we'll make sure that we try to get that before that time.
Number 9.
Number 9, yeah. Okay.
Move to adjust the agenda so that item 5 comes at the end of the agenda, and that as necessary, we move number 9 forward in the agenda. To ensure that it occurs in a timely manner before 1:30.
Perfect. In a second. So again, we have a motion by Silva, second by Kim Lopez. We have to do a roll call. Roll call.
Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garn,
Aye.
Commissioner Bumblebee, represented by Irina Brosman. Commissioner Claire.
Aye.
Commissioner De La Cruz. Commissioner De La Cruz. Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose
She
Lara.
gave a thumbs up. She could hear us.
Okay.
We can.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara. Aye. Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan. Commissioner Silva.
Aye.
And Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Great. Thank you all very much. Then we'll move on quickly to item number 6, which is the fire station risk assessment report. And we'll turn to the acting executive director, but we also have John Wayne Connolly, our senior structural engineer, with us as well.
Thank you. So if we can pull up the slides. Jaw is going to talk us through this. We'll try to keep it short, but it is highly technical. So if you need us to stop and go back and repeat anything, please feel free to do so. Okay.
Thank you, Executive Director. Good morning, commissioners. We are going to present the results we have for the fire station seismic risk assessment. And Laurie and I plan to tag team. So the project objective, we would like Laurie to give an overview to remind what the commission original objectives.
So they're here for you to see. Hopefully online you can see them as well. The first item or objective was to collect the building inventory of fire stations and their status with regard to the Essential Services Act. It's second, to understand the potential structural vulnerabilities and community impacts. To do a risk assessment and a benefit cost analysis through a couple different methodologies or tools. Provide data, finally provide data to fire stations utilizing review of hazard mitigation assistance or other grant funding opportunities. So kind of start to finish, we want to understand what the vulnerabilities are and then help point the fire stations, fire districts to the funding source to potentially get that mitigated.
Thank you. As Laurie mentioned, we have 2 phases. The phase 1 is initially the run of the hazards advanced engineering building module and then FEMA BCA toolkit to using default inventory data from hazards And this process is mainly to help us to inform how do we design the survey questions so we can collect the relevant information and also to have a broader view of the risk assessment, just looking at the default data. And then phase two, we're gonna update the fire station data based on the building specific information collected through the survey, and then redo the analysis of task one and present the results. So phase one, we have two methods. One is the hazard AEBM, which is estimate the average annualized loss due to the building damage and casualty. And then this is based on the 2018 National Seismic Hazard Map from USGS. And then the second method, as Laurie mentioned, is the FEMA BCA toolkit that is based on the 2014 USGS seismic map. And then the so the input is we select the station built in the era of 1941 to 1975 with reinforced masonry with flexible diaphragm or wood building in the most seismic active area in California. And then the same building inventory for the same group of building were updated to assumed to be the high code or special high code and ran the two toolkit. And then in terms of the loss, the functionality, we made the estimate that each fire station serves 30,000 population, and then the closest fire station provide EMS is 5 miles away. And EMS is important because there's a specific methodology for FEMA to calculate the loss avoidance due to EMS.
If I may also, kind of jump in there, because here in the room, we have a line right across the bullet that's kind of crucial. And that is there's 3 levels of the building code. There's the moderate, there's the high code, and then there's the special high code. And we are gonna talk about all 3 of those, basically starting at the moderate level and then upgrading to the high code. And then what more would it take to upgrade to the special high code, which is where we would expect emergency services facilities to be, or we would hope for them to be. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. And then the cost, incremental cost, we have to reference this FEMA 156, and it's dated 1994. However, FEMA hasn't updated this, and then this is so far the most authoritative source that we find. And then this, the cost is based on a few major factors. Is based on the building type, building group mean cost, the area, and then based on the performance objective. That's why Laurie made the distinction. It depends on which code you want to upgrade to, and then the location adjustment and time adjustment to fast track to the present day. And then I'm going to present the results in 3 broad categories, which is the benefit and cost ratio between the 2 methodology, and then also include or exclude the loss of functionality based on the BCA toolkit, and then also the retrofit to different performance category, either high code or special high code. And then the first results is based on the comparison of the toolkit. As you can see, let's just take the left chart, for example. The blue is if you had to calculate based on the hazards AEBM module, and then the orange is if we use the BCA toolkit. So the blue, the number on the horizontal axis functions between 0 and 2. However, for the same group of building, if you calculate based on the toolkit currently, the number is between 0 and 8. So the toolkit seems to give a better ratio. And then the next category we're looking at is including or excluding the loss of functionality. This is based on BCA's toolkit. So a lot of information on this chart, but the commissioners, if you could just look at it, pick one point, like over here, then the vertical axis represents that if we had considered the loss of functionality, then for the same point, it's above 26. However, you look at the horizontal axis is when you don't consider the loss of functionality, the same point produces a BCA ratio of 8. So this is an example to highlight that the pattern remains the same. So it seems like, the contrast with or without the functionality, is significant. Next page. People can help me to advance to the next page, thank you. So the, oh, I think we missed the one. Oh, that's one. Okay, thank you. So here is the same, you can see that, the vertical axis represents if you had a retrofit to the high code, from moderate building code to high code. And then that's the ratio, it's between, pick the top point right here. It gives you a ratio above 2. However, if you look at the same point, and then the horizontal axis represents the same BCA for the same point, but then it's retrofit to the special high code, it's about 0.7. And then the pattern remains consistent with the data we are looking at and the methodology we use to calculate the cost. So the conclusion we make so far is, first of all, is the absolute value of our benefit cost analysis is not as, if it's above the 1.0 threshold are not as significant because the assumptions we made that are very broad and not building specific. However, based on what we look at it, those default building data, it can give us some insight. PCA toolkit generates better PCA ratio compared to the AEPM module. And then, however, the toolkit doesn't calculate the loss of content avoidance. And then also the loss of functionality analysis is very significant in terms of the PCA ratio. That's based on the default assumption. As we mentioned, we're going to rerun the analysis with building specific data. And then the last is the current methodology is support from moderate building code to high code. However, from moderate to special high code, because of the additional cost of seismic retrofit, is more work needed to be done to justify the benefit of an additional cost based on the sample data we are looking at and the methodology we have adopted. So the final recommendation is to prioritize the retrofit for the fire district. So based on the service criticality, the population served and distance from the adjacent fire station that provide emergency medical service is the big one. And then the BCA toolkit is easier to use, provide better results, but it doesn't quantify the loss of content. And AEBM can provide the loss of content. However, it usually require engineer to run the AEBM analysis. It's quite it's more complex than the BCA toolkit. And then, so want to give the commissioners an update on the survey results. We launched in April last year. And then 8 months later, we have over 1,000 fire stations statewide responded to the survey with building specific data. And that's about a third of the number of stations, a little bit less than a third. So we are working with the Cal OES GIS IT team to create a dashboard to present the results after the second phase analysis. And the phase 2 is ongoing. We are updating the building inventory data and then rerun the phase 1 analysis. And we are looking at the funding opportunities to compile a list of resources and then incorporating phase 2 results into the GIS dashboard. And then we are also required to do a legislative reporting, AB 1717. And the staff is working on the reporting. And this is one of the most important slides here. We want to thank the ad hoc committee members to guide the staff through the process and the technical oversight. And then also Cal OES chiefs to provide a very valuable input on the survey design and also help us to distribute the survey. And then the technical experts from the industry provide very valuable advice for us to run this analysis. And then also our OES colleagues provided the oversight and the technical support. And also the GS team provide very valuable input and then are working with us to create the dashboard. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions and Laurie is also.
And thank you. And first off, thank you to the ad hoc, Commissioner Wells. Thank you for serving on that and thank you for the work. And I think there's a few questions. Or I could,
Why don't you
I don't
go first?
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know we were talking briefly about this report, and I appreciate the methodologies of identifying the costs going forward to upgrade. I guess, but stepping back from that, out of that 1,056 fire stations that responded to the survey, a third, which I think is a good percentage, it was self-reported, right? So the assumptions that we're making, or have we made assumptions regarding the seismic resiliency of those buildings is based upon what they reported, the type of construction when it was built, all those kind of factors. Is that true? So I guess what I'm looking for is, okay, how many seismically deficient buildings are we talking about? I know in our own county, we have a few fire stations that I know need some additional work, and it is worrisome. And the audience for this is both those municipalities, districts, local jurisdictions, fire, to make sure that they're aware that, hey, you might have a problem here and you need to make some investments in your structure.
Chair Rapp, that's an excellent question. The broad result we show today is based on the default building inventory. So it's not even the specific building data that you are looking at from your district. The results wouldn't be accurate, but then what we are presenting is from a broader perspective. What you are talking about would be the results for the phase 2 after we rerun analysis with the fire chiefs that responded with their building specific data.
Okay, I get that. And I think it's important to give those municipalities and districts the ammunition, the tools to understand, now what do we do when we've identified a deficiency in the building or that we have a structure that is in need of some upgrade.
Understand, yes.
Commissioner Silva.
Thank you very much for the report and the work. As a layperson, but a municipal leader, this so far is very technical and not easy. It can't be understood. I think, so correct me if I'm wrong, tell me what you've done so far is really test 2 different tools to see which one tells us better, gives us better information.
Yes, to understand the assumptions the tool made, and then the methodologies, and then also the broader, give us to look at the results and help us to guide the survey.
So once we go into phase 2, we have 1,056 packages of data.
Yes,
Are we confident that we have a good representative sampling of all of the various types of buildings? Because it looks like to me what you're trying to say is there's one element which is the structural integrity and the structural type of the fire station building. And then the other is all of the socioeconomic factors such as distant population served, distance from population, condition of the roads, inclement weather conditions that may occur during different times of year. All of that is not probably the data set that's coming from the different fire stations. How do we get to representative sampling of the building structures themselves? Do we need 2,000 fire stations, or do we need just a few more of various different types? Do we know that?
you can collect, based on the results we've seen, we have a broader building types than the default building, the default database from FEMA, which is good that justifies this effort to do the survey. So we have accurate data. And then in terms of how big representation is enough, this effort is a rolling effort. We are based on the AB 1770. We are supposed to collect data for 5 years. So what we're trying to do is now we have a third of fire station. We want to analyze it and then try to provide the data to help the fire district. So they see the value of working with us to provide the data that they can have feedback to help them to identify some roadblocks or opportunities for mitigation. And hopefully next year we'll collect more data through the fire stations that hasn't been working, but then through public outreach that they can provide the information to us.
So are we trying to get data on every fire station in this state? Or are we trying to determine that there are 9 types? And I'm just making this up. Some are single story, some have of building types, and we're just trying to get enough, a representative sampling of enough of each of the types so that a fire district such as Contra Costa Fire District, which I'm somewhat familiar with, that Commissioner Wells is quite familiar with, would be able to look at the information on the various types and say, we've got one of these and one of these and one of these, and we need to basically then take it. Each district would have to take it further themselves. Or are we going to try to basically make an analysis of 3,000 and we're not trying to get all the way to the analysis of our fire station in the state, right? Please.
No, that's not the end goal. We're trying to analyze based on what we see to see if there's broader policy issues and then provide feedback to be that is helpful for the fire district that we can leverage the information to do either seismic retrofit or put a package together. But then, yes, we wouldn't declare victory only when we collect all 3,500 fire stations. Wrap up the project. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I'll be looking forward to phase 2.
Any other questions from my colleagues? First here in the room, is there anyone online that has a question regarding this? And again, I just would want to say thank you very much. Obviously, fire stations are essential building structure that we want to make sure are going to perform as best as possible in any seismic event. I do believe that in the Napa earthquake, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a fire station in Vallejo, maybe this is an anecdote, where the early warning system worked well, that the door got open prior to the shaking and allowed an engine to get out. And I know in San Francisco, that's vitally important. But again, I believe at the end of the day, we want to give the tools to the local jurisdictions, the municipalities, the districts, fire districts to make sure that they are looking at their buildings, making sure that they're to the code that they need to be able to perform safely when the earthquake does strike. So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone? No one from the public. Thank you for that. We will move on then to the next item on the agenda. Since we're doing okay for time, which is I'm sorry, what?
There's a motion for vote on this report.
Oh, there is a motion. I'm sorry. This is to review and approve. So I'll look to my colleagues with no further discussion. Is there a motion to accept the report? I'll second. So Vice Chair Guards with the motion and Commissioner Wells with the second. And with that, can we have a roll call?
Yes, Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Bubba, represented by Irina Brosman,
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara.
Aye.
Commissioner McGowan,
Aye.
Commissioner Silva.
Aye.
Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. Now moving on to item 7, which is the project ad hoc committee votes. There's a series of ad hoc committees that we have formed that we need a little confirmation of actions moving forward. I'm going to turn this over to our acting executive director.
Chair Madam, I'm sorry to do that, but I did not vote, so just for minutes, I will also do aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
I skipped, you're right next to it.
So between at the last meeting in January, we talked about setting up ad hoc committees, and between then and now have done solicitation with the commission to find out who's interested in sitting on these ad hoc committees. A couple of them will have recommendations for you beyond just the commission members, but we'll go to the next slide. And chair, and commission, what is your preference? We can go through all of them, or we can do each one its own separate vote.
Do you need each one as its own separate vote, or can we take them all in one?
I'm
I'm
seeing it.
hoping for the latter.
Unfortunately, we do have to take them independently.
Oh.
All right. All right, we will get through
We'll
all of
now.
them. Okay, get your moves and seconds really fast here. The first one is for the mobile home building code brick project ad hoc committee, and we'll talk a little bit more about brick later in the meeting, but the two commissioners showing interest in that were Chair Rabbit and Commissioner Bumblebee.
I'll move. Second.
We have a motion by Kim Lopez and a second by Silva, and roll call.
Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garn,
Aye.
Commissioner Bumblebee, represented by Irina Brosnan,
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan,
Aye.
Commissioner Silva. Aye. Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, on to the next one. This is the fire station inventory project. They've already been active and helped us with some of the report review, but the two commissioners are Commissioner Claire and Commissioner Wells.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So motion by Rabbit, second by Kim Lopez, roll call please.
Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garn,
Aye.
Commissioner Bumblebee, represented by Irina Brosnan,
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan,
Aye.
Commissioner Silva. Aye. And Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving on. The next one is for the Building Health Monitoring and Shake Table Project ad hoc committee appointments. This is highly technical in nature, so our commissioners that expressed interest, Chair Rabbit, Vice Chair Garnes. We also have talked with UC Berkeley, who of course is the contractor doing this project, and asked if there were others that we could put on the ad hoc committee. These are experts in the area. Dr. Kishore Jaiswal from USGS, Professor John Vanderlyn from Colorado State, also Director of INCOR, and Dr. Silva Vitor from Global Earthquake Model. They have all expressed interest in being on this ad hoc to support Chair Rabbit and Vice Chair Gaines as they go through a lot of this data and reporting.
Motion by Kim Lopez, second by Garnes. One quick note on the folks that are helping us. We thank them very much, but they're doing it for the sake of research, not for the sake of.
Exactly, it's all volunteer.
And are we appointing all five or just the two? commissioners?
All five?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and roll call please.
Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garn,
Aye.
Commissioner Bumblebee, represented by Irina Brosnan,
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara.
Aye.
Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan,
Aye.
Commissioner Silva.
Aye.
Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, and the next one is the Ferndale Turkey Project ad hoc committee appointments. This is actually two parts, and one of the parts is multi-phase. So the commissioners expressing interest were, again, Vice Chair Garnes and Commissioner Miyamoto, who's not here today, unfortunately. This another one, we've actually utilized some of these technical experts already in looking at certain data sets, and talked to both, Chair Garnes and Commissioner Miyamoto about bringing them on to the ad hoc committee. Dr. Hamid Dadi from, CTS, Professor Farzad Naeem from USC. And Professor Carlos Ventura from University of British Columbia.
Great.
Second.
Motion by Kit Lopez, second by Silva, and roll call, please.
Chair Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Garnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Bubba, represented by Irina Brosman.
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz. Commissioner De La Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara. Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan.
Aye.
Commissioner Silva. Aye. Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I do need to beg the commission's pardon for a mistake that we made on the slide. Our technical experts were switched. Those last group of technical experts that we voted on for the Ferndale Turkey were actually the UC Berkeley Building Health technical experts and vice versa.
I make a motion to reverse the order and take one vote.
Thank you.
Motion by Silva, the second by
Second.
Wells, and with that, on the correction, switching the technical experts on those last two items. Roll call, please.
Okay, Chair Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Garnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Bubba, represented by Irina Brosman.
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara. Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan.
Aye.
Commissioner Silva. Commissioner Wells.
Sorry, Tanya, my name wasn't called for that last roll call. Was that just an oversight?
Commissioner De La Cruz.
Thank you. Aye.
And the last one is for the executive director recruitment. The commissioners showing interest here were Chair Rabbit and Vice Chair Garnes.
Second.
Motion by Kim Lopez, second by Silva, and roll call, please.
Chair Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Garnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Bubba, represented by Irina Brosman.
Aye.
Commissioner Claire. Aye. Commissioner De La Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara.
Aye.
Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan.
Aye.
Commissioner Silva.
Aye.
Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. And as we move on, just thank you for your patience. Thank you for being able to make all that official. Thank you mostly to the commissioners for stepping up, serving those ad hocs, but most importantly, the staff for all their work as well. So with that, we'll move on to item 8. And it was suggested, and I think it's a good idea that we'll kind of, if it's okay with my colleagues, I mean, it's on, we'll burn through the break, and if you need to use the room, you can, and meanwhile, we'll keep going and try to get as much done as possible. We'll move on to item number 8, improving post-earthquake firefighting water supply capacity reliability. And well, there's I think Dr. Scott on line, correct?
That is correct. Dr. Scott, I see you there.
Sam, excuse me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good, I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can see it. So Commissioner Scott, if you remember, came and presented to us in January at the meeting. We asked to go back and work with an ad hoc committee to revise or refine the proposal and then bring it back to us at the next meeting. So he's here ready to do that. Thank you, Dr. Scott-Thorne. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Pleased to have the opportunity here. I've got a very brief presentation and plenty of time for discussion. So just as a reminder, in 2011, the Commission funded a survey of water and fire agencies to address the question of water supply in regard to fire following earthquake. That survey covered 2/3 of all urbanized California fire and water agencies. I don't recall the exact number, but on the order of 100 water and fire agencies responded. The report was published, as you see here, as a commission report and also as a UC Berkeley peer report, fully available. That's just a reminder of the 2011 study. Proposal today, I'm giving you a status report now. I actually detailed this in January. The status is that this January, I met with the ad hoc committee, Commissioners Kim Lopez and Wells, on 20th of February. I also conferred with Executive Director, Acting Executive Director Nazura, and had good feedback in both cases. On the basis of that, I've revised the proposal. And the proposal now consists of 5 tasks, a very minor task for project management. The second task is a survey to update the 2011 survey. Why? Update the findings to the current situation. We have the results of 15 years ago, but what is the situation today? Identify the gaps and new issues that may have emerged and the progress that was made on things that happened at that time. And to include some questions related to wildland urban interface fires. I mean, at the time of the last commission meeting in January, we were in the midst of the Eden and Palisades fires. So it's obviously a highly relevant question. So the survey will address that to some extent. And to third task that I'm proposing is that based on the survey, to develop a mitigation toolkit. And that is to identify the spectrum of beneficial measures for water and fire agencies, provide a method for identifying which measures are most appropriate for a particular agency. And then task 4 is dissemination. And based on feedback from the ad hoc committee and Ms. Nazura, this is now an optional task. So it has 2 options. One is the full dissemination as proposed before, as previously proposed, which includes workshops and follow-up support to various water and fire agencies, or optionally not included for now, omit it, and decide after completion of basically tasks 2 and 3, the survey and the development of the toolkit, how best to disseminate that. And that decision will be made in consultation with the commission, of course. So the proposal therefore has 2 options, either including dissemination or postponing dissemination for the present time. Last task, of course, is the report. And just as a reminder again, the survey would cover water and fire agencies. Would update, as I've already gone through this, would update the current status and so on, and would have 2 foci, fire following earthquake, and more generally, because it bears on the conflagrations that would follow an earthquake, the large urban conflagrations a la the Eden and Palisades and many other fires. Well, the mitigation toolkit would examine a number of different mitigations. These are some of the events that have happened. For example, host tenders and portable water supply systems, resilient drinking water system, various kinds of making water systems earthquake resilient. Things that have been done in San Francisco, for example. This is the Vancouver dedicated fire protection system, another high pressure protection system, and earthquake early warning. All these are different, and there are other mitigation techniques. Matter of fact, for San Francisco, these were all examined in a structured manner, and that's what I'm proposing to develop for the entire state now. That would be task 3. I'll just conclude that. So you have the entire proposal before you. And with that, I thank you for your presentation and look forward to questions and your decision.
Great, thank you, Dr. Scott-Thorne. Appreciate that. And
Sure.
to my colleagues, and thank you for serving the ad hoc, and I'll go to Commissioner Kim Lopez.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Scott Thorne.
Sure.
You know, at the commission meeting, Commissioner Silva and Chair brought up a really good point that Scott went to, which is let's step back a little bit and look at the overall picture. What are we trying to do? What is the role of the Seismic Safety Commission? Who are the other partners that are out there? And specifically, you mentioned AQUA, the Association of California Water Agency. And that certainly got us thinking about how do we step through this? What are we trying to achieve? And we kind of broke our conversation into 4 parts, which is what is the role of the Seismic Safety Commission in this area, especially given all that's happened with the LA fire, all the attention, the national attention, and we know there's more coming. And this is actually an opportunity for us to really step in front and really be a convener, because we take a lot of information. It's been very helpful. We fund a lot of great work. We support a lot of great initiatives. But here I think it makes sense to convene because it's such a large issue. It's so multifaceted. And then we can talk about what is the partnerships that are out there that we can leverage. The second part that we talked about was, the resources that we have and being really mindful that we wish we had a lot of money to give away, but we don't. And I know we skipped on the island, but with craft, there is limited amount of dollar that we have to fund a lot of studies and projects. So what is really sort of the incremental way that we could step through this and giving ourselves room to adapt and adjust as we learn? Because if we make decisions and commitments before we have the information, we might be redoing a lot of that, and we don't want to be inefficient. The third is how do we create something that really speaks to all communities? I know that the work Dr. Stockton did in 2011 really kind of focused on the larger areas. And for those of us who have worked and lived and still do in smaller areas, it's really important that these communities are also represented. And what is the best way to make sure everyone is included in this discussion? And last but not least is really what is the scope and the timing of Dr. Stockton's work. So we kind of divided this up, and I want to thank staff and Commissioner Wells for really shepherding this. And what we thought would make the most sense is to use the partners that we have. And today in audience, we have AQUA Executive Director Marwan Khalifa and the Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs, Chelsea Hayes. And they do an amazing work. We have a variety of existing committees. We also have some new task force that have been formed since the strategic planning session. And there's different avenues that we can take in working with AQUA to be able to reach all the water agencies. Instead of us trying to do that, replicate that work, we already have a mechanism in place. So let's work through them, do the survey. What is the right questions to ask? Let's look at the 2011 and see how much of that we want to mirror. What are some of the new realities that we want to reflect? And then let's make sure that we do the outreach to get feedback, because I know some of us, I'm guilty, don't always respond to surveys. So how can we really motivate people to answer? And then you have networks through the fire authority. There's associations that Commissioner Wells knows. And so going through that, again, to design the survey and push it out and get a lot of feedback. Then we can sit down and look at the findings. What are the gaps? What are the issues? And that allows us to understand how we step through this mitigation toolkit, because everything comes at a cost. And we all know funding is just like going away at the most critical time. So before we jump to any kind of toolkit or recommendations that are unfunded, potentially mandates, let's really analyze the findings. Let's have that one more conversation to figure out what the recommendation from that report and from that finding should be that is both manageable and effective. And that's why we thought we would just phase the work. So starting with the survey, let's see what we find. And based on that, we could do a workshop and we can utilize different associations. And that way the Seismic Safety Commission doesn't have to fund the whole thing. Because I know that water agencies would be interested in sponsoring that workshop, and I'm sure fire authorities and cities would as well. And bringing water and fire together to have that conversation, to talk about the findings, and to sort of baseline our expectations before we jump into recommendations that are going to have, a long-term effect. And the legislators are gonna look at this, and we want to make sure that we're very diligent in what we're recommending, and that we are to a certain extent all on the same page. Then as far as the dissemination, again, those things can come in a different funding source. I think right now we are all strapped for money, but we know that this is critical. I can certainly share with you as a water agency, seeing what happened in LA, sends chills because now there's gonna be a lot of scrutiny. And, we can sit here and say our system was not designed for wildfire, well, public doesn't care. So we have to figure out what that next level of work needs to be. And we want to be very integrated in how we work through that and take into not just those who are working at the state level, but at the federal level as well. And I know later in the agenda, we're going to hear from the National Institute of Building Science. I see also that as a way to get some federal partnerships, but, I like to start sort of in a manageable way so that, there's two of us and staff and there's a whole bunch of other things to do and stepping through that with Dr. Scotthorne. And I know staff has spoken with Dr. Scotthorne about this. And I think for him as well, he gets to be part of something perhaps larger than we originally envisioned back in January. So we feel that by sort of zooming this out, defining the role of the Seismic Safety Commission, sort of level setting expectation and being incremental gives us the time to adapt and adjust depending on what we learn and also when external conditions arise. So.
What she said. No, I've never been there. Well, thank you both for serving. I really do appreciate it. And I think, and thank you, Dr. Scotthorne. I'll look to my colleagues for any other questions, comments. Please.
Thank you very much for listening in January. And I think this is getting more robust, which means it has more opportunity for success and better. Let me make sure I understand what you clarified. So during the survey portion, we're going to take that data and basically talk about what we've learned before we decide whether the next step is how to refine the subsequent steps to meet what we learned. Does that mean the commission can get a report out on?
Can we go back to the proposal slide?
Sure. Let me bring it up here again.
I'm looking at the tasks and payments, and that isn't as robust as what you said.
Yes. And while I'm pulling that up, the idea is once the survey is done to bring the finding and report out to the commission. So then we can have a conversation about the base budget. So the first thing that we would fund is a survey that will give us the finding, and then from there we will. And I'm going to look to Lori there to make a clarification.
So it's up on the screen again, and I think essentially the proposal up here is do the survey, create or basically list all the mitigation possibilities. So it's the survey and what mitigation tools are out there today. So we get two pieces of information. And then,
Which are mutually exclusive of each other, because the survey is talking about with the fire agencies, fire districts, and the water districts, what's going on.
that's correct. And what it's looking for is vulnerabilities, gaps, and then the mitigation tools would be essentially how they could potentially fill those gaps, right?
Okay.
So mutually exclusive but connected. So, and then the number 4 down there, the dissemination, that's what he referred to as work groups in the January meeting. Convening different work groups. And that's what here, if you go for the not included for now, the B, the optional, keep that out, then what we get out of this particular proposal is the survey and its results, the tool, the mitigation, the exhaustive list of mitigation tools out there, and then the report telling about the survey and the mitigation, right? That's what we get. And then from there, we can look at those findings and then we can say, okay, does this, this obviously, we have to get this information out. How do we do it? Do we convene a series of work groups? Are they topical? Are they regional? Are they virtual? Are they in person? You know, that sort of thing. Who's invited? Who is part of the whatever committee to organize them? All that becomes something that we put off and decide later after we have these findings in front of us.
Based on what we need to tell people, we determine where and how to do it.
Exactly. Okay, why didn't I say it like that?
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? All right. So, I just wanted to mention that, I've heard the term unfunded mandate, in reference to the mitigation toolkit. The mitigation toolkit is hardly a mandate. I mean, first of all, I'm hardly in the position to mandate anything, and this was what the mitigation toolkit is going to do is going to identify a series of opportunities for improving situations. And it's going to provide a framework within which any agency can themselves look at that range of mitigation opportunities and select what's most effective, cost beneficial, appropriate for them. So there's hardly any unfunded mandates there. The range of mitigation opportunities will, to some extent, be driven by the responses from the survey. We'll find out what different agencies are doing, and that will inform the mitigation toolkit. There's already, as I showed in the slide, there's already a range of things which we know about, such as earthquake early warning, and many other things that are in that toolkit already. And the framework will assist agencies in selecting what's best for themselves. So again, it's not an unfunded mandate. Second, large versus small agencies. I've indicated all along that I welcome input from the water industry, and particularly as exemplified by Aqua. So I would certainly welcome Aqua on the advisory board, and we'll be happy to work with them both in reaching out to smaller agencies, which we did in the first survey also, by the way. But again, making sure that we cover the spectrum of agencies. Actually, I prefer to be exhaustive and mail it out to all of them. And also frame the questions in the most appropriate way, and so on. So those are just two comments, which I think are consistent with what Commissioner Lopez said. Kim Lopez said. Thank you so much.
And I do want to point out one nuance. There's a difference between taking an inventory and saying this is what you should do. Because every region is very different. Not everyone has the same challenges or resources. So I think taking a look at all the inventory is very educational and helpful. It's the recommendation that we have to be mindful of. Because when someone looks at all the lists, the first question is, everyone should be doing everything on this list, and that is just unrealistic, and we really have to temper that so that people aren't setting standards and requirements that we're not ready to do, and that was the only nuance that I wanted to clarify.
Well, let me just clarify that, please. I mean, I don't see a range of opportunities as imposing what people should be doing. I've just said, and I emphasize again, that there'll be a framework in which they can make their own decisions. There's no moral imperative or anything else for any agency to do everything that's on that list. Some things would be inappropriate, clearly inappropriate for some agencies. So nobody is imposing any kind of an unfunded. Nowhere in my mind do I have the idea of telling agencies what to do. I'm simply saying,
So,
here's things that can help you.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yes.
What
Thank you.
our position as a commission is we're a public entity. So when we put out recommendations, whether they be soft or strong, they are perceived differently than if a private entity put out recommendations. So we're being thoughtful to how a commission-sponsored report would put out recommendations. And I think having our ad hoc committee work very closely with Dr. Scotthorn and other experts in this will guide it along that narrow path that we have to trot as a public entity, to make sure that we get out of the report what we need.
Thank
All
you.
right.
And let me just add too, and I know that Commissioner Kim Lopez obviously has the subject matter expertise in delivering water and a member of the Aqua Board. I'm on the Aqua Region 1 board. I think I might be joining you next year on the other board. You know, I think it's wonderful that we can use all the expertise that exists out there and the firsthand knowledge of the systems that are in place. I was on the panel, the Ledge Aqua Board regarding fire. Really, it was right after the, talking about what happened down in LA, you know, where systems were not built to deal with that. We had our own issues in Coffee Park, for instance, in Santa Rosa. And I'm not sure if you could ever have a system that would be built for that kind of demand. And I know the flow, maximum flows and all those other things that are out there. But there is a lot of infrastructure within the state, and I think that we could use this, much like with the fire station, as a menu of suggestions, and with moving forward, that will put us in a much better place. I don't know, interties or, you know, things that are responsible things to do in case of emergencies that we can bring forward. I appreciate having all the collaboration of the groups together. And I do think that we have to be sensitive in terms of how we turn that over. Because you're absolutely correct. If the hydrants don't have water in it, everyone's looking, you know, that's a problem. And we need to be able to deal with that. At the same time, there's going to be times where those can be flagrations that might be the case because the demands just can't keep up. So with that, if there's no more discussion, I'm looking online. I don't see any of my colleagues with a hand raised. I will look for a motion moving forward to the requested action. Okay, wait, I'll go to the
I did want to clarify, it was on that last slide, but the original project was $90,000 with the workshops. And as we if we choose to remove those and just do the survey, the mitigation list project tools and the report, then it's $68,000.
Ask another question. Does this proposal include the continuation of Commissioner Wells and Lopez on the ad hoc committee?
Yes, it does. We just voted on them too. We folded this into the existing fire following earthquake project, so they'll actually have oversight in their ad hoc committee of 2 projects.
Right, thank
This
you.
would be
Thank you
the
for reminding me. That's what I wanted to get sure.
Sorry.
I make a motion for the survey, the mitigation list, the report, and option B, $68,000.
I will second that.
So we have a motion by Garnes and a second by Silva, and with that, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garn,
Aye.
Commissioner Bumble, represented by Irina Brosman,
Aye.
Commissioner Claire,
Hi.
Commissioner De La Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward, represented by Jose Lara,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim Lopez. Aye. Commissioner McGowan,
Aye.
Commissioner Silva,
Aye.
Commissioner Wells.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Scotthorn. Look forward to continuing to work together. Moving on.
I
it's
just
okay.
want to thank you very much. And I do look forward to working with all of you and the ad hoc committee. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 9, which is the National Institute of Business Sciences, or NIBS, a lifeline infrastructure hub, supporting critical lifeline infrastructure recovery and resiliency. And We have a couple of guests here with us today. Ron Iguchi and George Gustav. And I apologize about butchering names. It's what I'm really good at.
First, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time here and, we're of course very honored to always talk in front of any of the
Thank you.
commissions and agencies here in California. We recognize that California.
Is it on or is it just? I don't know.
I will protect. There we go. No problem whatsoever. Okay, alright. Number one rule is always check the power, right? So here we go. Again, thank you very much for this time. We have recognized through our 51 years of existence that California has always been the leader in finding, adopting innovation across the built environment in the public interest. So we're very honored to be here and speak to you today. So just to start, the National Institute of Building Sciences was created by Act of Congress in 1974. And we were created because Congress recognized that there needed to be a bridge that helped bring together the public and private sectors of the economy, that there needed a bridge between the federal, the state, the local. And as they looked across what was happening during that period in the early 70s, they realized there was so much happening in the field of science, in the field of innovation, that they needed to have an authoritative source of findings and recommendations that were independent, nonpartisan, and also able to really focus in on the technical findings that best represented the public interest. And so they created the National Institute of Building Science. And we were given a couple of initial mandates. I know it seems very odd right now, but 50 years ago, there were no such thing as national building codes. That was one of the very first missions that were given to NIBS. What became NIST and HUD actually led this coalition to, with the support of 3 regional building code agencies to create national model building codes. And I want to emphasize how much that has changed this nation. And that even back then, California had such a critical leadership position in the creation of national codes and has continued to do so. I also want to add that we are independently funded. So Congress decided that the best way for NIBS to be independent and nonpartisan was to create for us a funding stream by having us act like a small AE firm for federal contractors. We do not have any significant members or corporate sponsorship as our funding source. And because of that, we are 100% aligned with the public interest, and we can always bring the best technical findings and not have to worry about member interests or any other interests getting in the way of that. Our central philosophy is really simple. We believe that building innovation is the foundation of American innovation and has always been so. Whether you're talking about homes and the fact that families need a safe environment to live and thrive, whether it's commercial buildings that would help create more productive communities, or as we were talking to the Caltrans folks yesterday, roads and bridges that are the arteries of commerce. So why are we doing this and how do we do this? We bring together, we convene, we use consensus-based approaches, and we make sure that everyone has a voice. But at the end, the data speaks. We are data-driven, fact-based, and always allow the technical solution that is in the best interest of the public to be the one that is presented. One of my favorite graphics here, if you're into infographics, this is what we consider to be a virtuous cycle that we try very much to be at the center of and to always, and we are inspired to be a part of. So you have 4 major communities that are part of our built environment, whether it's research academia, the SDO standards development organizations, public sector governments. When we look at the design and construction, the AEC industry, and then finally the owners and users. What we try to do is make sure that we continue to have those links together so that we are constantly in the public interest, seeking to streamline and mainstream the very best innovations for lives, livelihoods, and communities across the country. Our public sector, our public interest focus is pretty simple. When we look at the built environment, we believe that foundationally, the built environment is where we need to, as a nation, always come back to so that we can provide the stable pillars of economic growth. We want to make sure that there is operational efficiency. And we always look for the ways that we can increase safety and quality of life. And I do have a couple examples here. Many of you may be familiar with the Building Seismic Safety Council, the BSSC. BSSC and NIBS for 45 years have been at the heart of creating what is known as the NEPA provisions. So those are the seismic provisions that are, that update and are ultimately adopted into the seismic codes for the country. And this is an example of how we bring together all the parts that I mentioned before of the built environment. We have the formal scholars. We have the folks who are actually putting into practice, the best practitioners. We have public sector officials. And we have folks who have a deep understanding of the discipline around seismic safety. And they are all volunteers that come together and work with us to provide to the nation updates to seismic safety standards. One of the other things that we have produced over the years is something called the Mitigation Safe Study. Recently, you may have seen a lot of press releases that actually go back and talk about our Mitigation Safe Study. Because what it does is it shows the ROI on mitigation. $1 spent pre-disaster to mitigate will return at a minimum $6 post-disaster. So that's a very strong rate of return. And that is the minimum amount. You look across here and there are instances where you have greater rates of return. The other thing I like in highlighting this is that Congress, when they created NIBS, created us to be a fully formed PPP vehicle. So this study was conducted by with the funding of 3 separate federal agencies and 4 association private sector funding sources. We brought all that together, created this study, and then of course we disseminated through the public and through the federal agencies. We also are in the community trying to advocate for resilience and be champions of resilience wherever we can. And it's one of the reasons why we're so excited to be talking to you today, because my colleague Ron is going to be talking about what we are trying to do with lifeline infrastructure, understanding that buildings is one of the components of lifeline infrastructure, but just one. And that if you look at Lifeline infrastructure as a system of systems, there is an urgent need to optimize across all the systems versus just optimizing one system. And one of the ways that we know and that has been proven out is unfortunately in the aftermath of the wildfires. If the wildfires were approached as a system of systems in its mitigation efforts, in its preparation efforts, then we believe that those lessons learned going forward will help to save lives, livelihoods, and communities across California and the country.
Thank you. I want to be mindful of your time, so I'll try to go through these slides very quickly. You know, I've been involved with NIPS, for a while. That's not my full-time job. I actually have another job. But one of the things that I really liked about NIPS is that they are a junior facilitator. And I think in the sort of issues, that you begin to deal with lifelines, where it's very complex, especially when you start getting into serviceability and so forth, you really have to have the ability to bring together experts to focus on, these very important issues and to come up with some sort of consensus base, for how you proceed forward with solutions. And so this is one of the reasons why when they asked me to chair this new entity or the Lifeline Infrastructure Hub, I said, I think this would be a good idea. Okay, so one of the things that I always say to people that I talk to about lifelines is that there are no resilient communities without resilient lifelines. And a lot of times we don't really recognize that until we actually have a disaster or we have a disruption of service. For example, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the LA fires. And you see how important, that serviceability and having these systems in place is so important. And I think everybody in this room here has been hit by some disaster. I know that the chairman, the Napa earthquake, I believe that Silva, the floods that hit Contra Costa. So I think that, we all recognize, that disasters are going to affect all of our communities. And we really do need to look at, the disaster, the preparation, and the very, very holistic sense. And from that standpoint, lifelines, and George talked about systems and systems. You really need to look at, this problem in a very holistic way. You know that water systems, for example, are very dependent on power, transportation, roadways are very important, particularly the post-disaster situation. So it becomes very important that we understand, that the solutions for a lot of these complex problems really have to encompass a much, much broader perspective on how you approach these. So the mission of the hub, and I'd like to just summarize the benefits. It is really to develop, generate the right public and private partnerships to look at what we need to do to enhance the resilience of our lifeline systems and natural disasters. There are a lot of things that we think are very important. One of them is, developing stronger partnerships between the private sector and the public sector. We also think that, you need to have good guidelines for how you try to increase the robustness of these systems. So, the past history of events, is very, very, has been very critical in looking at building codes, trying to help improve building performance. We want to do the same sort of thing for lifelines. And to some extent, we were doing pretty well maybe 10, 15 years ago. There was the American Lifelines Alliance, which was very important because we produced technical documents that agencies and operators were able to use to determine, number one, how to identify weaknesses within our system, and what are the possible options, for improving performance, either through mitigation or response. The other thing is that we also think that, it's very important that you have a strong research agenda or program. And one of the things that I think is really very key to this, and June talked about this, earlier. You want to have the best information, best data to be able to ensure that development, whatever you're trying to put out there, is validated, is calibrated. And you don't want to have to keep coming back, to change things. And this is why it's so very important to collect data and information from the events that occur. If you don't collect that information and you don't archive it, it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for you later on to be able to pull that information in and to use it to develop methodologies. Maybe as Dr. Stockford talked about, these toolkits, which are very, very important. So we emphasize, the notion of the importance of collecting data, archiving it as soon as you can, when these disasters occur. And then finally, I think what's very important is the dissemination of whatever it is that's being produced. Publications, I think just, the notion of bringing together, stakeholders and users, and sort of combining them with subject matter experts and people that have actually experienced a lot of these disasters, I think is very key. And that's, again, I think one of the strengths of NIMS in the past, and we're going to certainly do this as we move forward with Lifeline infrastructure development. So we have even at this point, we have a very broad set of stakeholders, and I didn't mention that, the hub actually started less than a year ago, back in May of last year. So it's not been in existence very long, but we've achieved some very important milestones. One of the first things that we did in May was we conducted a national workshop. Subject matter experts, with stakeholders and people that certainly saw the vision of that's Lifeline, Lifeline streams and capacities. And out of that workshop, we identified some real important priorities that are helping guide us in terms of how we sort of address immediate needs and how we look at the longer term picture. They're made up of public, private sector, academic institutions. You can see some of the oil companies and so forth. All of these entities really play a very important part in what we're trying to move forward and achieve. Okay, in this, two more slides. So the key priority is as I indicated, is the notion of developing design guidelines, standards, and goals so that we can ensure the performance, acceptable performance of the systems during disasters. And I will go through these, but I did want to point out one thing because the fire station, the benefit cost analysis, which was very interesting, Jeff. The use of HACCP, HACCP started with NIMS. NIMS was actually the developer of the first set of hazard codes. And so I think that, they recognize and we recognize the value of having tools, that are standardized and are consensus based and that incorporate the best information available. And so this is the sort of thing that at least excited me in terms of being involved in the subject. And then finally, one of the things I just wanted to share with you are some things that we're doing with the LA fires. We recognize along with others, the importance of trying to study again, these systems and how they form in some cases not so well. And we're creating an initiative. We're collecting information and data so that we can begin to go back and look at how we might be able to do things differently to enhance resilience. And one of the things that you may know recently is that the city, the mayor of the city of LA, Mayor Bass, issued an executive order which talked about, I think it was 11 or 12 different priorities that needed to come out of at least this disaster. Two of them focus on lifelines and infrastructure. One of them in particular looks at water systems. Okay, so I think that just recognizing the importance, of these systems in any sort of disaster, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's wildfires, floods, all of these things, I think is very important. And so, hopefully over the next, several months, we're gonna have updates and hopefully, at some point, we would be invited back to give you a progress report on where we are. And be able to demonstrate that, we're really making some goals. So, anyway, I'll turn it back to George, you can field any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. And something to note, being data driven, that's something we all want to be. You look at kind of our society and how it's adopted AI. I always tell people, AI is great, as long as you understand what question is being answered. And hopefully the question that's being answered is close enough to the question that you need answered for the answer to be valid. The other part is, without the data, chances are you're getting an insufficient answer. Your risk models are most likely not sufficient for what you want them to be, because they don't have the depth and breadth of data that would actually make them truly sophisticated and truly of value to communities. That's why we have this emphasis on that. I tell people all the time that you may not have heard of us because, in our heart of hearts, we're all very well-intentioned nerds that just want to do something that will help communities. And this is one of the ways. So the American Lifelines Association, we know that made a big difference. It got dissolved, but there's always been a gap, and that gap has yet to be filled. And so we are trying to step forward to fill that gap. I don't know if there's any questions at this point.
First off, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your patience. I'll look to my colleagues for Commissioner Kim Lopez.
Thank you. When I first joined the Seismic Safety Commission, I was a bit of a squeak girl. It was almost 4 years ago, and we always talk about structures you can see, and I said, well, water and wastewater, you don't see, what about us? And, there's a little bit of a chicken little in me of we're not ready. We try our very best to be ready, but certainly all these other wildfires, I know LA got a lot of attention, but just in many ways, we're not quite as ready as we would like to be, because it takes a lot to get there. It takes a lot more funding than we have, a lot more speed than right now that we have room for. So partnering with these different sectors just makes so much sense, because when we look at historically all the funding, even the most generational one, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, out of the core lifeline sector, water, energy, transportation, and broadband, water came last. Water always comes last. And I thought, well, how do we work together? And as I was trying to talk about this, it was a perfect alignment that I heard about this Lifeline Infrastructure Hub. I was very honored when they asked me to join the advisory panel representing utilities to see how we could work together, integrate our efforts to shape policy in the right way, to get funding when we need it and how we need it. And I think right now we need that more than ever. And we just talked about how the Seismic Safety Commission is a convener and we need as many partners as possible, locally, statewide, federal, so that we can just try to navigate through this time of uncertainty and still have some allies and strategies of how we might go forward together to make sure that these sectors are not ignored. I'm very excited about the snapshot that they're working on from the LA wildfire, because all four sectors did not perform the way we would like to. And it really illustrates what we're talking about in this one major event. And there's so much visibility, there's so much attention. It's a really great opportunity for us to all raise our flag and try to get the things that we've been working on to a higher level of public attention, the political will. And I love that the well-intentioned nerds, and maybe that's why I was invited, but certainly really encourage the commission to continue to invite these folks back. There's a lot of things that they're working on that I don't even know about, but I know they've got some really great partners, and I think we can make some really good partnerships together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, I'll just say for myself, thank you for being here. And I was thinking as you were going through the slides, how important the subject matter is, of course. But you know, in our own history in Sonoma County with 3 major wildfires, and especially the first one, the worst one, all that stuff is so interrelated. The alert warning systems to the evacuations, how you do one will affect how you do the other, and vice versa. But also thinking about, again, no matter how well prepared you think you are, there's more to do. To me, it's almost like the communication. There's certain things that you do really well. There's always room for improvement, and it's a continual moving forward. And I think as Commissioner Tim Lopez talked about, to do that, to reach out and to work collaboration with folks who really take these subjects on and identify those gaps and filling those gaps is so important. I mean, again, thinking back of so many instances where you're learning on the fly, and I'm sure someone out there knew something, but we didn't know to reach out beforehand, even though we thought we were on top of things. So it's a bit of whether it's an earthquake, or a wildfire, or even a flood, and whatever other disaster is out there. So I really do appreciate the collaborations and kind of constant improvement that we all need to undertake. And thank you for your participation and your leadership in that. It's great.
You know, if I could add one thing, you know, when you look at lifelines, and in fact, even the name Lifeline came out of an event, a San Fernando earthquake in 1971. And we saw virtually every lifeline system component completely destroyed. And as a result of that event, there was just a, you know, a big surge of research, of collaborations, you know, that we just needed to do more. And so there were organizations that came out of that event, and we made a lot of progress, I think, for maybe 20 years or so. We have the Northern Earthquake enforced, you know, the notion that we still need to do more. But I think there's been this period where, you know, it's kind of maybe no earthquakes, you know, has caused us to go. Maybe it's not a problem. Well, it still is a problem when you consider all the other hazards and so forth. And so, anyways, we really appreciate, you know, the opportunity to talk to you folks about this and hopefully develop a longer term collaboration here, because I really think, as June says, you know, it's really needed to know the lesson. So, you know, in progress. So thank you.
Anything else? Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your work. Much appreciated. Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 10. This one's a little special for me because I sit on I'm actually, I think, the second vice president of the Golden Gate Bridge Board. I've been on the bridge board for as long as I've been a supervisor, so 15 years. And we have John Everly, he's the district engineer, and Dennis Mulligan, the general manager of the Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge has been undergoing seismic upgrades for decades, really, identifying. It still is a structural masterpiece of engineering, but it was also built in the 30s, and it is in a very difficult environment, obviously, and with fault lines nearby. And so there's been a lot of work, starting with the most vulnerable pieces, obviously, prioritized, and now moving to the main span, which is really interesting. We have John Everly, the district engineer, and Dennis Mulligan, the general manager, with us virtually, to kind of show us what they're looking at and what we're doing at the bridge going forward. Dennis or John, are you there?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
that a yes? Thumbs up? Very good, thank you. So yeah, good morning. My name is John Eberly, and I am the district engineer for the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. And as Director Dave Rabbit explained, I'm here to give an overview of the district's Golden Gate Suspension Bridge seismic retrofit. So yeah, thank you. So as some of you may know, that the Golden Gate Bridge is situated between two major faults, the San Andreas and the Hayward Fault. We're only about 4 miles away from the San Andreas Fault. Next slide. And the United States Geographical Survey predicts that within the next 30 years, there will be a major earthquake within the San Francisco region. And with that, reminds us, all agencies, to take some sort of action to ensure that the infrastructure that we're responsible for will be able to withstand an event. So the Golden Gate Bridge District has been working on retrofitting the Golden Gate in all of its structures. And the suspension bridge is the last portion requiring retrofitting. Next slide, please. So the suspension bridge is located between, on the San Francisco side, the southern side, between the Fort Point Arch, and on the northern side, in the Marin area, pylon S1, which is where it goes onto land. Next slide. Here's just an elevation of the bridge, and you can see here that the suspension bridge itself is 6,400 feet. It has a main span of 4,200 feet and two side spans of 1,125 feet. The roadway is approximately 220 feet above the water, and the towers rise to 746 feet above the water. But it's also comprised of other structures on both the south and the north end, which have been previously retrofit, and I would like to touch on those briefly to let you know what we've done. Next slide, please. So there we go. Phase 1 was completed in 2000, and that was comprised of the North Approach Viaduct. That entailed removing and replacing all of the land-based towers, expanding the foundations, strengthening the stiffening truss of the structure, and installing isolation bearings on the top of those towers between the stiffening truss and the towers. Next slide. Phase 2 was completed in 2006. Phase 2 was all of the south approach structures, which is the viaduct, the strut, the stiffening truss structure, and then the Fort Point Arch and the two pylons. The work at that location was similar to what was done at the North Approach, but it also included the north or the South Anchorage House. So in the South Anchorage House, shear walls were installed. Concrete strengthening was performed on the walls. And then on the pylons, those are large 200-foot tall, basically unreinforced concrete structures. So those were tensioning plates were added to the outside, and through rods were bolted through them, and then some cover concrete to keep the architectural features, but to give it some ductility during a seismic event. Next slide, please. Phase 3A was completed in 2013, and that was the North Anchorage housing. Similar to the South Anchorage housing, shear walls were installed, foundations inside were strengthened, and this is a little different. The roof of that is actually the roadway. So the roof was a concrete structure, concrete beam and slab that was completely removed in segments at nighttime with lane closures one at a time. And the whole roadway was replaced with a composite structure, steel and concrete precast segments. And then it was paved over. Next slide. So those were all completed, as was mentioned, due to funding constraints. The most vulnerable sections were retrofit first. And at the time, the suspension bridge, being the most flexible, was determined to be the least vulnerable to smaller events. But it is vulnerable to a very large event and will need to be retrofitted in order to perform under a large event. Next slide, please.
So the next slides are going to basically describe the scope of what the suspension span retrofit entails. Next slide. So as was mentioned, the suspension bridge consists of the main span, the two side spans, and the main tower. The structure was modeled in Adena modeling software. It was subjected to ground motions, which were developed for the location and was analyzed against a maximum credible earthquake of 8.3 on the Richter scale. Next slide. So the existing members were analyzed and a retrofit strategy was developed, and it entails three basic elements: strengthen existing bridge elements, replace bridge elements with new stronger elements, and install specialty devices which will manage displacements and also dissipate energy so not every single element of the bridge would have to be retrofitted. Next slide, please. So we'll start with strengthening. So here's a photo of both the north and south towers. You can imagine these are under a lot of stress right now due to service loads and all the dead load of the structure itself. But during an earthquake, these are anticipated to rock back and forth. And when they come back down from that rocking, the extreme fibers are going to be under tremendous stress and will have damage, a lot of damage, if not retrofitted. So steel plates are going to be installed at the base of these towers where the arrows are pointing to, about 40 feet tall, and that will strengthen the bases to prevent any buckling, localized buckling that may occur there. You can imagine this is under a lot of stress currently, so this is going to have to be very precision work so that we don't do any damage while we're taking out rivets and bolts while trying to install the new plates over the existing. Next slide.
Hey, John?
Yes,
Can
sir.
I add one? If we can go back that one slide. I just want to let my colleagues know, there was something in the news just recently that came out after the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the collapse by the ship hitting the fender. Here's Golden Gate Bridge. The north tower is on land. It's impossible for a ship to hit it or the ground before it hits it. The south tower is surrounded by this, built in the 30s, again, when the bridge was constructed, this fender, which is 10 feet wide at top and 27 feet wide at the base where it hits the bedrock, and it has a water ring around it. It's filled with sand, much like a modern highway collision buckets. But I just thought I'd point that out since it was such a great picture of it. There's a great watercolor painting of how that was constructed. But I think they were ahead of their time in terms of trying to check that span. Part of that study that came out on how bridges are vulnerable for ship collision, a lot of it has to do with the probability factors. And as John mentioned, the main span of the Golden Gate Bridge is 4,200 feet. I think the probability is correct me if I'm wrong, John, 1 in 486 years or something like that. And
That's correct.
There's another bridge in the Bay Area, it's 1 in 22 years. Because it's much shallower or shorter spans and more obstacles and more shipping and whatnot. I just thought I'd point that out as we were looking at that slide. Sorry, John, thank you.
No, yeah, that's great that you brought that up. And yeah, there was a study done. The district is doing our own independent study, but a recent study came out where it is about 1 in every 460 years where there would be a potential impact of a vessel of a size that could potentially cause damage, which we feel pretty good about 1 every 460 odd years. Okay, let's see where we're at now. We're still on the tower and strengthening of the tower elements. So on the right side, you can see the tower, and there's 2 legs, and then there are struts that connect the 2 legs. Starting from the top is strut 1, and as you work your way down, you get to strut 7. Right at the roadway level is what we call strut 5. And strut 5 is composed of steel beams in parallel going transverse to the roadway. And their bottom flanges are connected with lacing bars, which you could see in this photo here. And the lacing bars during the seismic event, they will not have the sufficient capacity to withstand the seismic demand at this location. So those lacing bars are going to be removed, and we're going to be putting in larger lacing and beefing up the connection to strengthen that particular element. Next slide, please. The roadway has an orthotropic deck, and underneath that are pedestals, which then connect to the floor beams. The pedestals themselves will have some strengthening elements to it. Next slide. And then the suspender ropes. The suspender ropes are located every 50 feet, come through the top cord and connect to the verticals of the stiffening truss. And all of these, all the way across the bridge on both the east and west side, will have a retrofit to them. Next slide. You can see here, this is where the suspender ropes come down, and they are basically under tension and are just have a very minor connection in a socket. During a seismic event, in order to ensure that the ropes do not become disengaged from that bracket, we're going to be retrofitting that connection. Next slide. So then the side spans and the main spans, where the interfaces at the towers, that's one of the most critical locations where a lot of the load gets drugged to. And it's also where there's differential displacement between the different structures. So at this location, we'll be doing some select retrofitting of the existing east and west stiffening truss members, both the top cord, bottom cord, and some of the vertical members there too. Next slide. This here is a photo of floor beams and the bottom lateral system. These will be strengthened. I'll show you a little bit in the next slide what we're doing there. So this is a plan view looking up of the bottom lateral system. You can see the dark lines there in that diamond pattern. Those are all the bottom laterals. They go all the way across the entire length of the bridge. They start 2 bays away from the pylon interface and the tower interface. So all of these will be strengthened, and then every floor beam will also be strengthened. Next slide. So here's a view showing what those look like. The bottom laterals are basically angles forming a box with lacing bars between them, both on the sides and the top and the bottom. So on those bottom lateral bracing members, all of the top lacing and bottom lacing will be completely removed, and there'll be a new, stronger cover plate that will be installed all the way across. And then the floor beams, there'll be some additional plates added to select floor beams on the bottom flange to stiffen up the bottom flange, and then also at select locations on the top flange. Next slide. In addition to the strengthening, we're adding some new, stronger elements. So one of those elements is called a cross strut. So where the interface is, again, you saw in that plan view, the bottom lateral system does not extend all the way to the towers nor to the pylons. So in that interface, we're going to be adding a cross strut between the bottom cords of the east and west stiffening trusses. Next slide. So you can see in this view here, this shows that end location. And this is where the bottom laterals end currently, and there's a existing cross strut there. There'll be one added just in front of that where there is no bottom lateral system. Next slide. Then on the floor beams themselves, floor beams are about 8.5 feet tall. And currently there is a very light longitudinal brace right at the midpoint, but only at every other location. So at the third points of the floor beams, we're adding a new longitudinal strut all the way complete across the entire bridge. It'll brace the top flange and the bottom flange of the floor beams. It'll also, since we're at the third points, it'll reduce the unbraced length of those floor beams. Next slide. Here you can see a photo of the existing longitudinal struts. You can see they're not very robust structures. They just have a kicker bracing up to the top flange, and they're only located between every other floor beam. So all of these will be removed as part of the retrofit. Next slide. Then on the top flange of the floor beams underneath the roadway, is a upper top lateral bracing system. So this resists wind forces, but it's also one of the primary factors in resisting seismic forces. You can see these are just, again, a built up box made up of angles and laced members. And during a seismic event, these are not sufficient to resist the anticipated forces. Next slide. So again, here's a plan view showing what the existing configuration. It's in a diamond pattern, very similar to the lower lateral system. Next slide. And then at the interface, at both the pylons and the towers, that upper lateral system all ties in, and the forces are all terminated at what's called a wind lock. So the wind lock is also going to have a retrofit component to it. Next slide. I want to show you this because, as you all know, the bridge is under service loads, and we cannot just go and remove that top lateral bracing system without having something in place to resist the wind forces that are currently being resisted. So the work will be phased. The new top laterals will be offset by one bay. That's what those dark lines represent. And the existing system will remain in place, and we'll have to put in an opening and kind of weave the new members through the existing elements. And until the new upper lateral is engaged, we cannot remove the old upper laterals. So this is all going to be, a big logistical problem for the contractor to solve, but we have details for it and are confident that they'll be able to successfully complete this. Next slide. And then lastly, after the strengthening and adding new stronger members, we're adding specialty devices. So specialty devices will be installed at each end of the truss spans, in the side spans and in the main span. And there'll be longitudinal energy dissipation devices that will be installed between the top and bottom cords and either the tower and the pylon. And as I mentioned earlier, those truss stiffening elements will have to be strengthened in order to transfer the loads. So what is an energy dissipation device? So let's go to the next slide. Here's a photo of a full-scale mock-up of a longitudinal energy dissipation device. And on the right side, there's a knuckle there. It's like a universal joint. And attached to that are called tongue plates. There's a top tongue plate and a bottom tongue plate. Then on the left side, where it's connected to the red element over there, the wall, there's another knuckle, universal joint, and connected to that is a box. And right in the middle is a clamping device. And in between the box and the tongue plates is a sacrificial bronze disc or a bronze plate. And it's clamped together at that location. And on the right side, you can see there's a slot. And so that allows for service loads for the bridge to move back and forth during service loads. But during an earthquake, the earthquake will overcome that clamping force and it will engage, and these plates will rub against each other. And as they rub against each other, that sacrificial piece of steel will start burning up. It'll start dissipating. It'll dissipate energy that otherwise would be imparted into the truss. And all of those truss elements would have to be retrofitted if not otherwise, this energy was not otherwise dissipated. And at the same time, these energy dissipation devices will keep the truss aligned and the roadway aligned. We don't want to lose the wind locks, and because the roadway will become misaligned, and that would be a big problem. Next slide. So those are longitudinal specialty devices, energy dissipation devices. But in addition, we have to have, an earthquake can come in any direction, so we have to have transverse specialty devices, and then we're going to have in-lock specialty devices where the wind locks are at. Next slide. So this is just showing all of the different framing at the towers. The towers are a little more complicated framing wise than at the pylons. The pylons we're just adding to the bottom of the existing floor beam a transverse energy dissipation device. But over here, we have what's called a portal frame. We have some bracket seats. We have some hinge stringers. All of this has to be retrofitted in order to first install those transverse energy dissipation devices and then to be able to withstand the forces that will be transmitted during a seismic event. Next slide. And then where the devices connect to the towers, it's a little different than at the pylons. The pylons are large concrete structures, so you connect to those to the concrete itself, and it is able to manage the load that will be imparted. But the towers are cellular elements, and they're 3x3, 3.5 by 3.5 cells inside, and are not currently designed to take that force. So we'll have to go inside the cells and put in a lot of strengthening. Over 800,000 pounds will be put into the towers just for strengthening the locations where the energy dissipation devices are connected. Next slide. So this is, again, the mock-up, and it was tested, full-scale tested for a number of seismic events at San Diego. And there should be a video that should work here, hopefully. And you could see what it's going to look like during an event. Here it goes. So there you could see when you have a large motion in an event and the plates are sliding across each other, and inside there is where that bronze material is at, and it's basically being sacrificed and torn up and dissipating energy that otherwise would be transmitted either into the tower or the truss. Okay, next slide. Oh, so that's the extent of what the suspension bridge retrofit entails. The Golden Gate Bridge is a lifeline structure. We are committed to opening up the bridge after large-scale event for emergency vehicles within 24 hours and the traveling public within 72 hours. So that is what the design criteria requirements are. That's why all of the members have to stay elastic during a large-scale event, and that's why the extent of the retrofit is what it is. And with that, we're finishing up design this calendar year, and we hope to go to construction at the end of the award a contract at the end of the calendar year and go to construction next year. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have on this.
Great, thank you very much, John. Appreciate the presentation, and I do have a question from Commissioner Kim Lopez.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I was wondering, when will the project be finished? What is the timeline and what's the cost?
So the timeline is
I'm finance chair, so that's why.
we have again, due to funding constraints, we're looking to phase this project to do the last phase of the retrofit. Currently, this phase is anticipated to take about 7 years to complete, but we're looking at modifying that to put it into 2 different phases. Do a first phase, which will take approximately 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and then do a further phase. And it all has to do with funding. So the anticipated cost for the entire retrofit is approximately in excess of $1 billion. So we're looking at funding for that. We're also looking at improvements. We're working on a CMGC process with a contractor to optimize the details and optimize means and methods to get the best price possible for this, but it's still going to be a very, very, very expensive project. One of the factors that is contributing to this is the painting. We have over 1.5 million square feet of painting associated with the retrofit. And the bridge itself, it was built in the 30s with lead-based paint, with 68% lead by weight in that paint system, and a large portion of the bridge still has that lead paint. Cal OSHA recently changed the regulations on workers' safety when working around lead paint. So they reduced the permissible exposure limit of workers by over 80%, which is a big driver of the cost. So they've also, Cal OSHA, the new regulations, which went into effect January 1st, they also limit the amount of time that painters are allowed to actually sandblast. So even though you're in a hood with fresh air being pumped in, a worker will be restricted to 5 hours of sandblasting. And then at 2030, they'll be restricted to 2 hours of sandblasting. So you can imagine if you're a painting contractor, if you're only allowed to have a worker work for 2 hours, you're going to have 3 or 4 times as many workers to get an 8-hour shift in. So those are driving up the cost much, much more than we originally anticipated. So when the contractor brought this up to our attention, that's why it made us pause. And so we're looking to phase this project so that we could get portions of it done, as much of it completed as possible within the funding constraints that we have currently, and then look for additional funding to complete the remainder of it. So I hope that answered some of your question.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything? Is there anyone? Please, Commissioner Clark.
I was curious, in that simulation at the end, what was the magnitude of the seismic activity that was tested?
That was so we did ground motions. So that was replicating ground motion of 8.3 earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. So it was about I want to say a 90-second period of what or a 90-second duration of that replicated a 90-second earthquake duration. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyone else? John, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to present. I don't want to show my bias. I did serve on MTC and was on Bay Area Toll Authority. We had those other bridges. I think that the new span of the Bay Bridge uses viscous shock absorbers in my layman's term, whereas we chose to go in a different direction, partly because keeping the liquid in those shock absorbers is problematic. And I do appreciate the approach that we've taken on this. While it is an expensive endeavor, it's obviously much needed and required to keep the historic structure safe going forward. I will say this too, I feel proud that during my service on MTC actually got, because the turnover of the 7 bridges to the Bay Area Toll Authority, there was no capital reserve per se, and now there is. Whereas the Golden Gate Bridge, because we have no other taxing authority other than the tolls, we do have a capital reserve that looks forward to these projects going forward. And actually, we're just finishing up the suicide deterrent net, which was another major project, which is saving lives and was the right thing to do. Took longer, and it's probably more money than we thought it was going to be as we went into it, but it's hard to get pricing on putting those kind of things on a bridge like the Golden Gate. So, John, thank you so much again for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. Thank you.
With that, shall we go back to 5? This was the item to talk about our funding and really just to kind of broach the subject of looking for ultimately a direction of how, quite honestly, how quickly we want to have a burn rate of the funding that's available to us. And maybe talk about a couple different options going forward. I think that we have, over the years, done some great work and funded some great research. I will say one of the challenges, I think, from the commission standpoint is that we approve those on a one-off basis, and we don't necessarily get to draw between all the different things that are in front of us in order to how best to prioritize expenditures. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lori.
Thank you. And I'm gonna ask Colin Tomlin to come up to the podium. He is the special projects budget guru. So I'm gonna walk you through a couple of slides that with Colin's help we put together. And then he can answer any specific questions about the budget itself. So if we can go to that first one. So this graph shows interest earned on the craft fund from 2020 through 2027. Why 2020 through 2027, you say? Because 2020 is when the Seismic Safety Commission came to Cal OES, and that was the data that was initially readily available to us. We have reached out, was it DGS? Where Seismic Safety Commission was previously. We do have data from them as well, but we're still compiling it, putting it together because it was in a little bit of a different format than where we are used to. So years 2020 through 24 are actuals. 25 through 27 are just averages of the previous 5 years, and it's not guaranteed. You all know you have your own personal IRAs, as do I, that get different interest rates. Interest is determined based on the pooled money investment account savings rate as determined by the Office of the State Treasurer. If no questions, okay, you already moved on. Okay, good. So this slide then shows the current encumbrances of the craft fund from 2020 through 2027. And as you can see, there were several years that there were no encumbrances. You see that black line, it actually is right there at 0. And then it kind of peaks in 2024 because we took on several projects that year, or that were encumbered that year. So among them, the shake table and the UAV, that was almost $500,000. We took on the UC Berkeley Pier project in 2023, that's 76 and change. The INCOR study, and some of these I'll talk a little bit more in my project updates. That was almost 99,000. The USC Quake Heroes was also encumbered in 2024. That was almost 100,000. Reducing post-earthquake ignitions, which is the first Dr. Thorne proposal that we approved in October. The building health monitoring from UC Berkeley, that was actually in the first part of 2025, so you'll see that there in 2025. So as you can see, with those projects now, the fund itself is decreasing.
We can't read this at all.
Can we make that any bigger?
It's not a lot.
Yeah. We will get the commissioners the slide.
But I will not be able to give any input on this at all.
Okay. Perhaps while we're doing this, if you could make copies for the commissioners, that.
Or we all just go up and stand close enough. It's far away. But can you go back to the previous one?
Previous slide.
So what is the x-axis and the y-axis?
Okay, so the The x-axis is the years. Can you go back one, please? Starting with, go forward one. Starting with the year 2020 on the left and 2027 on the right. And the amount in the fund in 2020 was $2,801,985. And then there was slight increases due to the interest, I'm sure. In 2021, it was $2,809,302. 2022, it went up to $2,855,539. And then it peaked in 2023 at $2,905,432.
So are these expenditures or are these the values
That was
in the
the,
bank, so to speak?
that was the funds in the bank.
And so these are not expenditures because this is the amount of money at any one point in time that we've had available.
That is correct. The blue columns, that's the amount of money that we had. The black line is our expenditures. And on the y-axis on the right-hand side, it gives you the amount.
Lori, can you jump back and just explain where the dollars came from originally? What the.
I'll let Colin do that.
Yeah, just a little history on the craft fund, how it gets funded over or not.
It was it was originally a settlement that,
Yeah, period.
I'm sorry.
That might get.
You just gotta
Yeah.
boom it out.
So
You can
the,
step closer if you want.
the craft fund was a settlement that the state received from, I believe it was from the Department of Insurance. Thank you. I was trying to read above us on the back. I was prepared to present today. And it was designated as a gift specifically for research and special projects. And Tanya, please correct me if I'm wrong. You are the subject matter expert on this?
Yes,
Is that-
no, so as we explained before, we have that settlement agreement. So when we're showing you the projections, what we're showing you on the blue graph is the balance at that time and what year. And so as Lori had stated, if we go from 2020 to 2023, that was the balance of the fund. So as we started to take on projects, we encumbered money for those contracts through a duration of time. So what we did and what I worked with Colin is even the recent projects that we took on, we encumbered money through 2027. So those are all the expenses that are shown on the black line. So what that does is it's showing you the decrease at the top of the fund once that's all been paid. So you'll be able to see if we currently don't take on any projects and we expense all of those contracts in 2027, the balance is going to be at about 1.8. And that's if we don't do any additional projects. We will have $1.8 million for that fund. And that's what we'll have at this time.
Thank you.
And today's discussion is really, in the big picture, are we okay with the burn rate?
Yeah.
Would we like to look at perhaps spending interest only going forward so that the principal remains, or anything in between? And, but I think it's important to kind of understand, you know, we have a one-time fund that can make interest. Correct.
Yeah.
But obviously, when you spend it, it's declining, and we have to figure out whether we're gonna continue to go in that direction and eventually get out of the business of doing that kind of research, I suppose, unless some other money from heaven falls.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to kind of look at, and again, not asking for decisions today, just trying to get consensus going forward. What's the interest on yearly?
So that's what we were looking at in the first slide. It's about $49,000 if we average it out. So some years it's more, some.
Yeah, so that's based on that rate, that insurance rate. So as you can see, one year we earned like 7,000 in interest, but the rates were low. So at the last year that we made 6 figures in 2023, there's that difference. So what Colin had done and we discussed was we took all 5 years, we kind of, what was an average amount of interest potentially to be earned? So we're kind of showing you, okay, we could maybe earn 49,000 on that fund in future years, but there could be less 1 year, more the next. So we kind of have to gauge what we spend based on what we have the previous year or in years past. So we really can't, get the magic number and know exactly what it's gonna be because we're earning interest from our past year, right? And that's,
If it's in the treasury pool, that's
yeah,
gonna
we don't have control over
fluctuate
that.
on market, everything else.
Yeah, the treasurer was pulled, yeah, exactly, that pulls together with all the other special deposit funds, so it's just kind of up in the air in that regard.
Commissioner, yeah, well,
So I say this because it's not the budget fortunately, but I think also if you don't spend it, it gives up the impression it's not needed.
Yeah.
And we ran into that with some other agencies. And I think at a time right now with, again, just everything being in top of mind for everyone since the wildfire, just watching the Golden Gate Bridge and thinking about a major seismic event and knowing that lifeline infrastructures have vast room for improvement. I think that we should spend, not all of it, but I think we should spend the money so that we can, as a commission, have something to say. Of course, we want to be selective, and I think during my time, we have been very selective in the programs and we can debate about what to fund. But I do think it's an important time to make that investment because that's the way I see it. It's not an expenditure as so much as an investment. And if it's gonna help us figure out some platform to be able to influence policy or get in those discussions, that's gonna have a very big impact right now. Again, things are a little bit spinning. So I think it's more important to have that presence. The second thing that I would say is, I don't know if there's been any research or looking at how we might be able to generate funds to do these kinds of studies. And the reason why I say that is because maybe through some partnership, we can even go after private funding. We know right now public funding is very unknown. So maybe there are some private funding opportunities. And if we can partner up and we can partner on studies and research, we don't have to fund all of it. I mean, several of the presentations that we saw a bunch of logos of different people. And maybe that's the value of partnership too, is allows us to spend and invest without necessarily tapping into craft.
And I think what we had on the third slide, which I think what Commissioner Silva was looking at was a burn rate on the fund based on our current situation. So what we kind of captured here was from the last year that we know, like if we exhaust our current contracts that we have now, where we would be at, we're at about a 1.9 balance on the craft fund in the blue graph, the tall blue graph. We would have about 195 in expenses that year. So then that would take us at about 1.8 in 2027. So conservatively, if we kind of approached it to where I thought maybe what's a fair amount, let's just say 150,000. We just decide as a commission, that's a good amount for us to kind of spend moving forward. But I also encumbered the amount of us earning interest at about 49,000. So that's kind of what we're showing here is if we look at that, and we set ourselves at a conservative rate over the next couple of years, it will slowly, gradually decline. And we could,
Do we have a final year? This is, we did 2 slides for you. We did a conservative burn rate and we did a aggressive burn rate, which is the next slide.
Yeah.
This one, if we, we're looking at the aggressive one now. If we spend $195,000,
that was just for the first year. That
First year.
at 300,000.
we know in 2026, we have $195,000 already that we plan to spend based on current projects. So starting 2027, if we spend approximately $300,000 and earn approximately $49,000 in interest, the fund will burn out in approximately 2020. Now let's go back.
2030.
20, 30.
2023.
I did.
We're going retroactive, we're going retroactively.
Yeah. But if we go back to the conservative, this is based on $150,000 of spending per year. And an estimated interest of $49,000 per year. And as you can see, by 2030, we still have 1.5 million in the account.
Commissioner Wells. Is that, when you use that 49,000 for interest, I'm assuming that obviously is gonna go down.
Yeah.
So are you still using that all the way across the entire?
We are, because again, like we can't project what the rate of interest will be earned that year. So if that's something that is of concern to the commission, we could definitely approach it at that point, see where we're at as far as how much we've earned. Because we pull those numbers from them, and then we can actually see, okay, maybe this year we need to do 130,000. If that's the way you want to look at it.
I think what Commissioner Wells is saying is that if we were to project this out to the end year, then we would have to overlay it with interest earned would decrease as the principal decreases. So there's additional modeling that would need to take place if we were to take the chart all the way out, and we certainly can do that for you.
This is how we analyze how long our pension trust funds are going to last. And that's correct. But the other way to do it is rather than assuming it's $49,000, is to basically what percentage is that? Because it's the percentage interest averaged over 8 or 9 years. It's cycle. And basically there's a rule of thumb that says if you only spend 4% of your savings, you're gonna have the whole thing still there when you're done. So it's just finding that right sweet spot. But I was also going to say, I think one of the challenges we have is not deciding whether to spend it or not. We're rather scattered in the way we do it. Many organizations have an annualized grant funding cycle where they not only say we're going to give away $500,000, but they also say we're going to do it at one point in time, because otherwise I feel like it's like the first one in gets the money, and they may not be the one we really want. And I don't know how we change our mindset, or at least have that conversation. So it'd be similar to an application process and then having it happen at a specific time of the year. Correct? Yeah, and it's hard. Yeah. Competing for housing dollars at the local level and watching the different cycles of funding, but somehow going to be consciously strategic. We also have to have the ability to say no, or have the ability to challenge some of the proponents like we did in January. I agree, there could be others out there. We could be partnering with somebody, but not, we seem to be a source of funds to favor nation status.
So that, I wrote that down, that's one good option, one funding cycle per year. Also, there may be years where, there is a project, a single project or series of projects that you want to take on that exceed a 1-year cycle so you may want to say, we're gonna miss this one, we're gonna pick it up again next year, or we're gonna do two-year cycle and we won't have one next year. Or you can put a strategic plan in place, so funding priorities in place, so that if people come with proposals that don't even meet your priorities, you say thank you, but no thank you. Or there's a lot of options here, and so that's why this was meant to be a discussion of throw all of them out on the table and have a discussion about what makes sense for the community.
You know, that gave me an idea because I agree. I think we first need to have a conversation, not today, about what do we want to fund. Yeah. What do we want? It's kind of a strategic, maybe it's prioritization session of what do we want to fund? Because over the years, we fund a lot of different things, like you said. And what is it, our list of priorities, things that we fund? I like the idea of making it competitive so that kind of everyone, you could see how that all works together. And even those that you deny, maybe there's a connection that we can make for them. So I think that makes sense about trying to figure it out as we watch the outer years.
If I can add, I think that makes us, what we do in this regard, more impactful and better messaging, because these one-offs just kind of come in, get on the agenda, and the way they often go with some funding, rather than having a conversation about what's most important today. Because I don't think running out of money in 10 years or 8 years. Last time I checked, seismic activity is going to occur for a very long period of time. How can we make these funds last and secure?
I will say that I will say that, you know, opening up even a grant cycle, or even a grant to itself, or at least a funding opportunity, there will be some work done by the staff here. So I want to be sensitive to a lot of the projects that are already in place, that will require bandwidth. Not only that, the amount of money that will be put out on the street that you will make, you know, eligible, whether it's $100,000, $200,000, will, you know, we'll run up with the same issues that we have with some of our smaller grant funds, that the amount of money is going to be correlated to the amount of applications that you get and the type of applications that you get, right? So we can't expect, we won't expect too many applications to come in if it's only $150,000 that's getting put out in the street, right? So it'll be a much bigger conversation if we start talking about methodologies, priorities, objectives.
You guys are all saying good things, so it's kind of giving me different ideas too. Maybe it would be helpful to see is sort of going back the last 3 years, how many requests we've gotten and how many we denied, because I don't really remember us denying a lot of it. So to your point about maybe there isn't that much request for the fund, I don't know. It would be a good data point just to see, and then we could assess the level of work that we might be taking on. That would be really helpful.
I think that would be great information. And to your point too, I think it's true, we don't want to burden staff. At the same time, I think, you know, we could probably, by just talking strategically about what are those kind of things that we do want to fund, we can make that decision, and then staff can use that as a filter and hopefully not create any onerous bureaucracy in that at the same time. Anything else? Anyone online have any need to add? Do you have, with that, do you have enough? The other thing we could do, you know, we've done a lot of ad hocs of late. The other thing we could do is to try to have an ad hoc of a couple to try to, one of those questions that we are trying to answer. I don't disagree with, in terms of, you know, the money is there to be spent. At the same time, it was the one-time funds, and trying to think of the future. So the commission in the future having no money to invest, or having to find another source of funds where that may or may not exist, and then how does that change what the commission is doing at that time? Would also be a challenge, I really believe, at this point. And then we meet 5 times a year, quarterly. So even doing an annual, is it? You know, but I do think that I think it was important to kind of look at this. You know, I don't know if it's, again, wanting to be cognizant of staff time within, you know, maybe the expressing of the minutes to kind of have just a draft fund update on a quarterly basis, just kind of running tally where we're at. So that when we, at least when things do come forward, we can go, maybe this is not one to spend the dollars on, or maybe this is the one this year. so on and so forth. So I think it's a good conversation. Is there anything? Please.
You could get on this, you've been on this commission for 15 years, I'm younger. Close to that. But maybe we can just see what projects and what cost. Because that gives us a sense of who's been asking us for money, because I just think of, the Eureka, Japan earthquake, tsunami, boats. Flooding. And I think we just look at it, we'll also get a sense of what kind of thing we should focus on.
Yeah.
We will do our best. I'll have to caution you that, we can go through the minutes and see what was discussed in the commission meeting and what was denied. I don't know how far back we can go. But what we won't be able to say is like, there have been ones that we as staff have kind of steered off. Or just because they weren't seismically, they weren't about seismic things. But I don't know how far back we can go in the minutes, just again, with regard to,
Even if it's just the ones we decided on. Yes. I don't know about you, but I can't say them off the top of my head, but that shake table's been shaking a long time.
and I do have a project that we've done all the active, great happening.
Do you need anything else from us? And what do you think about an add-on? I'm good. I just want to make sure that we give you the best advice going forward and to bring it back for discussion.
I think an ad hoc would be tremendously helpful or maybe the commission has a special strategic planning meeting whereby and think an ad hoc committee brings recommendations, we kind of push up our sleeves and put some things down on paper about what strategy we want to use going forward, what priorities we want to put in place. So it can be one or the other. Or both.
Let me look to my colleagues if there's any interest in serving on an ad hoc in that capacity.
I will.
I'm fine.
You raised your hand.
No, I'm not to volunteer for it. But, I do think that a special strategic, planning session with the commission would really be very helpful. Last year, I actually ad hoc for strategic ad hoc, and it was really just about a statement. It wasn't actually strategy, and it really threw me because I thought it was going to be more strategic plan. So I think that would really be helpful because that's like the grant, having an application process. I think that's a really good idea because rather than getting everything one at a time and trying to decide. So I just think if we have something in place, ad hoc committee recommendations, and then we actually set some kind of an idea of what we are looking at, a plan of what we want to accomplish, that would be very, very helpful for the whole body.
Great.
And then with the ad hoc, bring that to our next meeting.
For a special strategic meeting, where we're not up against the clock trying to go through a bunch of different agenda items, but actually focused on strategy moving forward.
So
I do like that idea. Be good if we could do that before July. Because I know July, we also have we always have a full agenda. Maybe if we can schedule something before then. And perhaps the ad hoc would be sort of monitoring and making sure that we are taking what we did in the strategic planning session and kind of having that continuous thread or connectivity.
If I may, between now and July, staff have a lot of project deliverables that are like ready to hit their workload right now. And that might be extremely difficult workload.
Or even we could, rather than having a presentation, like. I mean, there's important presentations, but rather than having a presentation, we take that presentation time and use that to have a strategy session during.
Lauren may also be saying that there's a lot of end of fiscal.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think if we form an ad hoc, I think the ad hoc could just help frame the next discussion debate we have. Perhaps work with staff to see what the history was of the projects, if that's available, and then frame a discussion to get us to the point where we can talk a little more strategically about those things we want to invest in. Does that sound right? And I think we would just work with staff and worry about which meeting that would fall into, given workloads and everything else. Trying not to exasperate things, but I think it's good to look at this and kind of figure out a strategy going forward. So I do appreciate the discussion. Sure, you did have your hand raised earlier.
I said I would volunteer for this.
Is there anyone else who's
I will
interested?
try.
You've got a lot of stuff on your.
I know, there's no.
Because we did this earlier with the other listing of the ad hocs, if you're both willing to serve. I mean, if Commissioner Kimberly has got other amendments, I'm happy to volunteer. So you guys can arm wrestle.
Yeah, we don't need to take it.
Oh, it's a good take.
Recommendation, maybe we do that by email, like we have with prior ad hoc committees. We can send out an email to
Okay.
solicit interest, and then we can confirm in July.
That's good. That's good. If that's good with everyone here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you all, and thank you for bringing this up, and I think it was a good discussion to have. We are at 1:20.
And,
Have to have a quick, which one for a closed session for the official record.
you know, I would love to just email you the updates on the other projects.
That'd be great.
And go into closed session, because both, Commissioner Pimenez and I need to leave in about 8 minutes.
Okay. So with that, we're going to adjourn and go into closed session. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And if you're not supposed to be here during the closed session. You don't have to go home.
Outside the door.
So the open session has concluded, and we're going into closed session pursuant to government code section 11126A1. During this time, the virtual session will remain open for the public. SSC staff will monitor those attending in person and who have not been approved to attend the closed session. Please exit the meeting room now. Those attending virtually will be moved to a breakout room. Please notify SSC staff if you have not been moved within the next 5 minutes. Upon conclusion of the closed session, commissioners and all attendees will return to open session for public comment.
Maybe that's the way, yeah.
It is cold. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm scared to go outside and find out it's 85 degrees.
I know, it's very warm out there. Ease into the temperature.
This should go quickly.
And then it's also stairs.
We can find this,
I still want to be alone. I knew that if I was like, I don't want to be alone. Somebody else.
We're almost done. We're going to go pretty close session right now. And then as soon as we can, we'll close the meeting. So we're only running about. Thank you.
Just to confirm, can the online participants here? Commissioner De La Cruz. Okay, yes, okay. Thank you.
Short supply, apparently.
What? It is locked out every time. Yeah, it's just his computer, so I see those, so that's, yeah.
Well, we'll go ahead and get into closed session and.
We have one item to discuss, and that is the executive director recruitment. It's a status update. We don't have a name for you yet. But I thought I'd hand it over to Commissioner Barnes to talk about, the steps that have been taken so far.
And if I can't, just before we do that, thank you so much for taking a day, full day, I understand, of doing, and participating in the interviews thus far. And I know that we've gone from what, 6 to 2 and getting close, so if you want to give us your impressions, that would be wonderful.
I think, that all the candidates were. Most all of the candidates were fully qualified and, mainly qualified, and I think we.
Yeah.
We did narrow it down to, 2 that are very, very qualified. It'll be good to go back and, speak with them again, ask them a few additional questions, get a better feel of, the individuals. But, the 2 that are remaining, still standing, are very enthusiastic and have a breadth of an experience. And I think that just asking the questions that were asked and looking at the responses, that we really were able to clearly narrow it to the 2 best applicants. So I'm excited to revisit with those 2 applicants, and I think that either way, we will be in good hands. And just the hope is that we get the best of the 2 that are remaining.
So we did, the initial interviews on March 24th. We had 6. And then the next round of interviews is going to be next week on the 17th of April. Chair Rabbit has been appointed Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Barnes, and Chief Deputy Director Tim Curry will round out the panel. So I'll step back at this point and she'll be on the panel with the 2 commissioners. And then the hope is that one individual will rise above the other. And they will come back to you with the recommendation. So we may need to do a special meeting. In fact, I'm going to say very hopefully and enthusiastically, we probably will need a special meeting before July, just for this one subject, to hopefully get the recommendation, hear about the candidate, maybe even hear from the candidate, and take your vote on what.
So the 17th will have the last interview. I assume at the end of that interview, we'll make a decision. Someone will then, HR will notify that individual and we'll take, I'm trying to understand the time frame that we have in front of us.
So the commission as a group needs to vote to appoint the individual, but what we'll do is when we get that one recommended or candidate, yes, they'll do a background check. And they've already done a preliminary on everything. So nobody got into the interviews without, being, at least preliminarily appearing eligible.
And there was a scoring section, I mean, it's objective and subjective because, but it's really, the scoring was really, we tried, I should say, to be very objective and look at the same points for everybody, not just, oh, I like this person's voice or like this attitude, it's like everything was scored and looked at the same way. And so hopefully that's how this second round is gonna go. There's gonna be a scoring sheet and we'll be able to, see.
This time around, you'll have some questions, but you'll also have the opportunity to have just a free flow or organic conversation to get to know the two candidates on a little deeper basis. And hopefully again, we'll have one candidate that you will recommend to them. Are we allowed to know who the two are? At this point, I don't, I guess.
I just know that's why
How about-
they say.
But it's not, it's not
Can you,
Sarah,
Can you describe their general background?
Sarah, are you on? Sarah?
From them?
So in scheduling the meeting, you'll just schedule it or you'll take a poll of available?
We'll take a poll.
Okay.
And it will be, obviously, everything we do is an open meeting, but it will only be a closed session. And then we'll come out of closed session, hopefully with a main, that's in a perfect world, I think we do that, we need to go to 3 interviews because, they're neck and neck.
Can I put you on the spot and just ask you, now that you served as acting, and notwithstanding the candidates that you probably already know, anything different that you would be looking for, qualifications for this particular position? Or anything that would rise above another?
That's a great question. Obviously, someone with some sort of a background that is complementary to the commission's mission, and both of the candidates do in different ways. We've got one person who is an earthquake person, but not a physical scientist, a social scientist, but who's been in the earthquake arena professionally many years.
And also has management and administrative experience, can stand up and talk us down.
Yeah. Well.
About that last one.
Yes, remember, this person's in the social sciences, so we'll have kind of the psychology administration. The other one is involved in private industry in the building sciences, and is an engineer. And has been involved in the seismic realm many years, and is brings a lot of memberships and relationships with various stakeholder groups to the table.
Or she's Sarah's on.
Oh, Sarah. If we can, we've narrowed the executive director recruitment down to 2 top candidates. Can I give the names of those candidates to the commissioners here in closed session, or should we just talk in generalities?
Yeah, I mean, it's the discussion of if it involves discussion of hiring, firing, performance, anything like that. You guys are free to discuss any of that.
Okay, so the two candidates are Ryan Kirsten, and Sarah McBride. And Ryan Kirsten, he is a structural engineer, I believe, and he works for a private firm. He's also, I don't know if he's the Calvo president currently, but he's the president of another building organization as well. So he's either, one is past, one is present. I can't remember which is which. No. He's located here in Rancho Cordova. He's very familiar with all our stakeholder groups and has good relationships, very close relationships with others that he can bring to the table. Sarah McBride works for USGS. She is their one and only social scientist. She does, what does she do? Social science working groups. And so in other words, her main focus is public outreach. And trying to get people to interact with, understand, and utilize earthquake safety in all realms.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to share this. This is my last meeting, and so I'm not sure if I should stay in this conversation. I think that my future replacement may make this decision in a future vote. So I'm happy to sign off, but I just wanted to make sure that I checked in with you before I did.
Well, you are still on the commission today, so
Are we voting today?
no, we are not voting today. This decision will be made at a future meeting. We're just talking about the top two candidates.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that Sarah has also had a lot of experience with a lot of different organizations actually, and bringing parties together and building communities and you know, so I think that's, like you said, that's probably her main focus. But when you look at the experience, and because I don't have it memorized, but when you look at the experience and you hear the way she responded, it's all, it reaches the top, the height of it. And as Ryan, as he has a lot of connections, for sure, a lot of partnerships, relationships.
And I forgot to mention, Sarah worked in New Zealand at the time of the Christchurch earthquake. And she was actually one of, immediately catapulted to be one of their top communications persons regarding the earthquake. And that's kind of catapulted her career in the seismic.
So I have to check if I have a conflict of interest because Ryan's wife is my employee and Diane is her boss. So I'm Diane's boss, Diane is Samantha's boss. Okay, so, you know, I know that they're bringing forth a recommendation. So we would be voting on the recommendation. So I think I'm okay, but I'd like to check that I don't need to be removed from voting. Or, you know.
Sarah, we call it back.
And we can actually get that information
Okay.
for you before the next meeting. Aren't you glad that you announced that one?
Well, yeah, I'm also glad that I know, you know, who the candidates are so that I don't compromise that in any way, so.
I do think it's interesting, though, going back to even what we talked
I
about.
know, I
before,
don't know both of them, I only know the one.
Expenditures going forward, if you look into the outreach, communication outreach side versus the more technical side. Candidates that come from. Besides that equation as well. there anything, just besides trying to make the best recommendation going forward? Obviously, I think we'll probably have the questions that we'll ask and the conversations that we'll have probably play off maybe those 2 ends of the spectrum. Kind of see how.
Ask them both to give the Golden Gate Bridge presentation. I'm actually serious.
Wow.
Fortune, did you guys see that? This is an aside, but Fortune magazine had an article yesterday. That, this guy who interviews people, he does a coffee cup test. And then if he gives them a cup of coffee, what they do with their coffee when they're done with the conversation is whether or not he will move forward with hiring.
It's
If they
interesting.
stand, if they step up and leave the coffee on the table, they'll lay that person's image. It goes to culture. I just thought that was interesting. So, you know, I've been in those situations where there's looking for.
I was just at Cal Cities the other day, and when I left the room, and I actually went back in the room and pushed my chair.
There you go.
And there was notes. And so it's like,
No, I'll just stand up and push a chair right in. We're gonna like take everything off the table.
I'm just a little OCD.
I want to come into the kitchen and
So-
watch it.
All we're doing, all this was for just an update, we're down to the 2, meeting on the 17th. And if you, I mean, if you have any additional questions or any kind of thing you want, just let us know.
You'll
Get back to me.
We will check on, does anyone else feel that they might have any connections to any of the candidates?
I know Sarah, but I know her professionally.
Yeah, but
I don't think
knowing
there's a
them
conflict. No, there's no
Being an
conflict.
employer is a different.
Yeah,
Supervisor.
I would think so.
Okay.
And I would have sent my alternate, but obviously same conflict exists.
Okay.
Are they? I think they're both several ones, but
One is-
the others,
The other one's from Colorado, but she said she would relocate, which was the success.
okay, so we're good? Yeah, close second, do we have to break up or? Don't see that.
We have to pop back in to,
Yeah.
to the open session, say.
Received an update on the
Okay.
recruitment, and that's all you have to say. Yeah, I think there was a couple, we did want to acknowledge Commissioner De La Cruz, Commissioner, Rodriguez, who didn't recognize him. Thank you.
Bye.
So we are back in open session and just a quick report out of closed session. We did receive an update on the executive director recruitment and direction was given to staff. And with that, we're going to take the project updates via email. And that brings us towards the end of the meeting. A couple, I was remiss in not doing the chair report early on. This is the way our meeting started. I wonder why.
We're all a little bit.
Yeah, I also pulled up the, what did I have today? But I'm gonna go, I want to thank Commissioner De La Cruz, as you may mention there, last commission meeting, thank you for your service. Thank you for participating and the value added, as well as to Commissioner Rodriguez, who we did not also have an opportunity last time to say thank you, but thank you to him as well. Here's what I wanted to say. Obviously, I think everyone here knows 2 significant earthquakes since we last met. There was a 4.5 on February 11th. up north towards, as many earthquakes are up north towards, Vice Chair Gard's, neck of the woods. That was a 4.5 depth of approximately 6.2 miles. We got an email on that, and thank you to staff for that. That was at 5:32. No significant structural damage or injuries are known, and it was a potential main shock of the earthquake series, and 223 earthquakes have been associated with that series. That's an awful lot. And then, of course, on May 27th, magnitude 7.7 earthquake occurred 11:20 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Mandalay, Burma, along the Seriging Fault, depth of 10 kilometers. Obviously, way too many lives lost with that particular earthquake, and everything that's going on with that. So our thoughts and prayers there, obviously. Still expected to rise as they go forward, and obviously a lot of recovery to do. I do want a little happier note, want to announce that Kyle OES, the earthquake exhibit, is at the Sacramento History Museum. It's open, available to the public in collaboration with CERT and Listos. I'd like to be able to get over there. The Seismic Hazards Branch created a display consisting of earthquake early warning and earthquake preparedness artifacts and products related to the theme of earthquakes to epidemics, disasters past and present. So again, that's over at 101 I Street in Sacramento. It's inside the California State Park and next door to the California State Railroad Museum. There's a charge to get in, but it's apparently well worth it to go see the exhibit. It's only there. It's only there for another couple of weeks or so, right? So if you want to get over there, now's the time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to one last person I do want to say thank you to, and that's to Lori Missouri for stepping up. Yeah, acting as being our acting executive director. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to serve alongside you. And thank you so much for all the work you do for this commission and for the other side of the hall, for the other building over there as well. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I have to say, I love being on and now working for this commission. You're so engaged and so fun, and the subject matter is so important and so dear to my heart. Your staff is absolutely fantastic and hardworking and just eager. So it's been a pleasure.
Is that it?
We're gonna move for official adjournment.
I so moved. Me too.
Hearing no opposition, we are adjourned. And I do want to say thank you to everyone for being here today, participating online. But most of all, thank you staff for all the great work you do. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone on the line.